In professional sports, a franchise player is an athlete who is not simply the best player on their team, but one that the team can build their franchise around for the foreseeable future.
Welcome into a brand new edition of Franchise Players here on WTOB 980 AM and WWBG 1470 AM. Every Friday, part of your TGI Friday lineup brought to you by TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. I'm your host, Desmond Johnson. Loaded show today. We've got WXII Sports Director John Johnson in the house. He's going to talk to us a little bit about the Panthers, of course. I don't know if anybody really wants to talk about the Panthers. Well, everybody does want to talk about the Panthers. We just don't want to watch them. So it's one of those things where you can't get away from it. The Panthers are 1-12, hosting the Atlanta Falcons this Sunday. We'll get in some info with him. David Glenn back in the house for the Sports Buffet, his bi-weekly joint through Tobacco Road Sports Radio. He'll come in and talk a little bit about the Draymond Green situation with Golden State. The college football transfer portal is out of bounds right now. There's over 1,300 kids in the portal. Only 200 or less than 200 have actually committed at this point to a place. So there's a lot of kids with no homes right now in that portal. We'll talk to DG about it, who's keeping a running tab on that. And of course, we've got 9th-ranked UNC taking on 14th-ranked Kentucky on Saturday in the CBS Sports Classic. He'll hit us with that as well. Before we get to any of that, though, opening this up, though, he is the co-host of Panthers Playbook over on WRAL, and you can go follow that on their YouTube channel with Dennis Cox. Mr. Chris Lee, what's happening, brother? How you doing, man?
What's good, man? It's tough for us people to have to talk about the Carolina Panthers, man. It's just when you hear the sadness in all of our voices. And
when you say us people, you mean Panther content creators, like the ones that are doing podcasts or have to do radio shows, TV shows, the beat writers, the reporters, like everybody. Like we're all kind of like like every time we get the Sunday.
Sheena Quick on Twitter planning her exit from covering
all that this morning. So y'all go follow me if I'm not with the Panthers anymore. So I mean, it's wild, man. I had Joe Person was in the spot last week after their article dropped, him and Diana Rossini's from The Athletic that all of us read, and I think some of us kind of knew but didn't really know for sure. And I asked Skylar on Believe in Panthers earlier in the week. I was like, did you ever catch a vibe of like the coaches not getting along throughout the season? And he was like, not exactly, but it'd be like Frank Wright would say something on Monday and then Thomas Brown would say something similar but a little bit different, like on Thursday or Wednesday. So you never really got the disconnect, but it never felt like they were clicking together. I wanted to start a brand new thing with Chris called Chris Lee's Top 3. So when he comes through, he's going to have a top 3 of something, and I'll prep him a little bit ahead of time, not too far ahead of time, because I want it to be kind of off the top of the mind. And that's going to be top 3 head coaching candidates for the Panthers in Chris's mind. We'll end the segment with that. Before we do that, though, I want to come around to Bryce Young, because both of us have had opinions on Bryce the past couple of weeks, in particular online and our podcast and everything else. Do you feel like Bryce, and I saw y'all asked Boomer this on Panthers Playbook this week, what do you feel like Bryce has gained from this year? Like, or has he gained anything? Because that's where I'm stuck at. I feel like he hasn't progressed. I don't think he's regressed. I think he's just kind of the same from where he was when we drafted him, which is alarming, 14 weeks into the season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think anytime somebody can step on the field in an actual NFL game and you can see NFL defenses and what they can do against you, how they disguise or whatever, there has to be mental notes he's taking for this, and things in ways he could possibly get better if the things around him get better. But the main thing that I've been saying for the last few weeks is that I don't know what blame we can actually put on a rookie quarterback, right? Like, this is his first year in the league. Of course, he's going to make certain mistakes. But when you have a situation where your coaching staff isn't getting along, your offensive line does not protect you, you're on pace to be sacked 60 times this year. Your receivers do not get separation. The scheme sucks. What do I have to evaluate from you? A lot of times when we are evaluating quarterbacks, we at least think that most of those things I just named are in place, right? Like, or, maybe a couple of those things are off. Maybe your offensive line isn't as good, but hey, you've got good receivers and you can get it to them. I don't know what's there to evaluate right now. So I can't sit here and say he's better, he's worse, he's the same. Like, he hasn't, I don't think has been given a steady platform to stand on. And when you can't even stand up straight because the foundation around you is just not, it's not steady itself. I don't know what else I can judge you on when it comes to that. Like, I said this to Dennis at WRAL. I have some of the best leadership in television and local television in the nation, right? So when I do something like a Ghost in the Stadium, or when I go on the 6 o'clock news Monday through Friday or whatever, if I look bad, that's on Chris Lee. Because everything else around me is great. It's steady. It's A1. Like it's top notch. It's Bryce can't say that.
Yeah, no, he really can't.
Bryce can't say that.
I'm worried too, because I feel like he's too nice of a kid. But I feel like if we're at this point next year, it's going to start leaking out from his camp. He wants to be traded. Like, that's what I feel like is going to happen if they can't get this figured out in the next 12 months, which is a tall task to begin with. And I said it also earlier this week too, and I'm really starting to believe it now in terms of going back and listening to sound bites from David Tepper over the past like 12 months when they drafted Bryce. We went and pulled a clip of that weird sequence when Fitterer and Reich were at the podium right after they drafted Bryce, and then just out of a tunnel or like a curtain or something behind them, David Tepper magically appears and just starts talking. He just starts talking about how they did it and the whole process and everything. And in that moment, he said basically that they mainly went for Bryce because they felt Bryce was a point guard, like the ultimate point guard that could distribute the ball. And with his own words, he says, we felt like we could spend less money at the skill positions because we had Bryce and we could use that money on the defense. And we all just glossed over it back in April when he said it. Like nobody really like went, what did you just say? Nobody's that. And I kept it in the back of my head. And now I'm looking at the roster. I'm like, well, he didn't lie. He did exactly what they said they were going to try to do. They went out and got lower end, low cost skill position players. And they basically neglected the line. The whole paying the defense part I understand, because he hasn't paid anyone in 6 years since he's been here except for Christian McCaffrey, and then you traded him off for no reason 2 years later. So I don't know. It's a weird dynamic that I don't know is going to get any better before it gets worse with no first round pick next year. It's like you've got Bryce, you got that one toy on Christmas. Like, remember that year where you only got one big thing? You didn't get anything yet, like you want that Nintendo bad, like in 1985 or whatever. And yet you got just that. You didn't get anything else. We've got Bryce. That's it.
To use your analogy, I mean, Bryce is the amazing video game, but you forgot to get the console together. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, so like how can you make it work and make it play? So it's just, the two constants in this is Scott Fitterer and David Tepper. And there's only one person of those that we can get rid of. And I would have liked to have seen Scott Fitterer get fired instead of Frank Reich early on. Now, I'm not saying Frank Reich should have kept his job. I'm just saying for Bryce's sake and not having play calling keep changing and having things kind of, whatever is going on with that, have something at least steady with that. He doesn't have to talk to the general manager while he's preparing for games. No. So get him out of there, get that, that search started early, and then fire Frank after the final, snap of the season is over. So
like before he gets off the field, don't even bother.
Tepper needs to get somebody in here who can take control of his team, that he can entrust his team towards, leave it to him and go back and just go away. For him to be as involved as he is, but not want to address the media as much, like at least with Jerry Jones, he's involved, but he's going to talk.
Yeah,
Jerry Jones is talking multiple times a week.
Yeah, he got his own show, radio show.
You know what I'm saying? So he's going to be upfront and honest about like the decisions he's made, and that's the thing that you can, I guess, respect about him. David Tepper don't want to talk to us.
It's always after something happens too. It's hardly ever before.
He don't want to talk to us. He wants to make a show of things, just like after the Tennessee game. The reporter said he came out the locker room yelling the F word.
He knew reporters were
he
standing
wants
there.
to show that he's angry.
Yeah.
He's bringing all these things to Bank of America Stadium so he can show that he's working hard to bring things to Charlotte. But you're not showing that you want to have a good football team, and that's ultimately what's going to keep your Bank of America Stadium alive. Honestly,
dude, he's running it like a hedge fund. Like he's literally running this team like a hedge fund. Where think about his actions. He's kind of spur of the moment in terms of he's let go three coaches now, three coaches now in the middle of the season. Yeah, he'll dump the stock if it's underperforming. He'll get out before it gets too late. He'll jump on something real early. He uses analytics. Like he's trying to do this like a hedge fund, and you just can't run a football team that way. Like it's just that's not it. Last thing on Bryce before I get you to your top three. I feel like some of the camps are getting conflicted because I feel like if it's like for you, like it's not necessarily you're being apologetic for Bryce. You just understand his situation. Like what are we supposed to do? There's nothing around him. But that makes sometimes it might come off to others like you're just giving him the benefit of the doubt and all excuses. Like we can't blame Bryce for anything. I'm on the other side of it where I'm like, I understand the situation he's in. I've had to watch all these games, so I know, I know what he's dealing with in front of him, and he don't have any skill position players. And even this past week, when they were actually trying to throw it deep, he was hitting dudes in the chest. He was hitting dudes in the numbers, and they couldn't catch the ball. So it's like, what else can you expect him to do? My only gripe with him was his footwork in the pocket, and to a degree, you can't really judge that because of the offensive line in front of him, but he can get out the way. At this point, week 14, he's got to know Icky's going to let some of these dudes through on the left side. Like, it's going to be 2 seconds, and they're going to be back there with him.
Listen to what you said. He's got to know that Icky is going to let people through. That's why his footwork isn't good.
True.
Because you can't be steady to set your feet to go throw.
He looked better Sunday. He looked better. Did you notice he was dropping back Sunday? Like it was more pronounced.
He was.
And he had more time, and he was throwing it deeper because of it.
I think some of that is also coaching and play calling and stuff like that.
And that article, that article, I think was really what it was because it got to the point where like everybody's looking at the coaching staff like, well, are you going to tell him or am I going to tell him? Like Frank Wright ain't here anymore. Like somebody's got to tell him. And I thought it was interesting that after all that came out, that he started climbing the pocket. He started going back. He started climbing the pocket, and he was putting more oomph in his throws, which resulted in deeper throws. Now, the part we hadn't talked about yet was what was going to happen when he started throwing deep, and the receivers couldn't catch it because that's where we are now. Like now, he's throwing it deep, and they're not catching the ball. So
not catching it, slowing down on their routes,
giving up on routes,
whatever. And that's one of the things I asked Boomer, and and I don't think Boomer knows football, so this isn't a diss to him at all because that's my guy. But he's not studying the Panthers. He's looking at all 32 teams.
Yeah.
But one of the things I started, because people were starting to complain about, well, Bryce overthrew these guys. Well, okay, we know that Tommy Tremble slowed down on his route.
Yeah.
If you can't, we've seen different times during the season where somebody like an Adam Thielen, he's really good at catching the ball, but Adam Thielen is so slow, right? So there's times where Bryce has led Thielen and he's just not there yet because he hasn't caught up.
Yep.
When somebody with the normal speed probably is there. So now we start seeing Bryce. Well, I don't know if he's going to be here where it needs to be. And so now people are like, well, he threw it behind him or he underthrew it or whatever. Like, he's guessing as to where these guys are going to be. Yeah. They're not on the same page, right? And so
that's true.
Like, that's why I'm giving Bryce the grace, because it's like he don't know where they're going to be. It's a guessing game every time. It's a guessing game if his offensive line is going to hold up as well.
I will say two things though that we had questions about Bryce Young that I think have been answered at this point of the season. His durability. Yeah, we were worried about
all the other quarterbacks have been hurt, but him.
Yeah, every quarterback.
Because I don't think he really had an ankle injury in week 3, but that's another topic.
We'll leave it there. Between like that, and he's not the type to throw people under the bus. Like, because he could have thrown this offensive line under the bus, his wide receivers, the coaching staff, like the whole organization. He could have thrown under the bus by now, and we all would have understood. Like, we totally get it.
He's better than me.
He's better than me. Like, I would have been, Team Petty at this point. Like, look, y'all got me trapped here for 4 years. Like, I'm locked up. I can't get out. Like, somebody come get me, please. Give me your top 3 as it stands the weekend of December 15th, 2023. In your mind, who are your top 3 head coaching candidates for the Carolina Panthers, or who they should go get?
Okay, so 3 kind of different guys, but I think all 3 can possibly make an impact. I think Ben Johnson is somebody you have to kick the tires on. He's offensive coordinator, of course, with the Detroit Lions. One of those guys that he's helped get, that place kind of turned around to what it is today, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And, you don't want to miss out on like the next offensive guru. So you have to at least kick the tires on it. The Panthers attempted it last year and he turned them down.
Before you go further with that though, that narratives out there that he turned down the Panthers. He didn't turn down the Panthers. He turned down everybody. Like he didn't go to any second interviews because he wanted to go back to Detroit and finish the job. It just sounds different when people are like, well, he came here before and he turned us down. It makes it sound like he didn't want to come here. That's not exactly what happened. He just decided to go back to Detroit. So and I never thought that he never wanted. I mean, he's from North Carolina. He played at AC Reynolds High School, went to UNC Chapel Hill. Yep. I would think that, especially as much as David Tepper likes to pay just to fire folks, I would think that he would at least take the check, right? Because like Frank Reich is getting like $25,000 a day for the next 3 years. Like at least take the check. It's like, yo, if it won't work out, you can just sit at home for 3 years and collect $20 million or whatever. Like that's actually a benefit of this job at this point. Like if you say you do get fired early, you just go have guaranteed money. Like
facts.
Like wow. Who's who's number 2 on Chris Lee's top 3?
Number 2 for me, and I think you'll applaud this, Jim Harbaugh.
Yes.
He has NFL experience, of course. He is a proven program builder on the pro and the collegiate level. He's somebody that I think that when you talk about now, if David, and this will only work though, if David Tepper gives him a good general manager and let them run the show together and not meddle in what they have going on.
Did he really meddle when Matt Rule was here?
I'm sorry.
Do you think Tepper really meddled with Matt Rule in the 3 years? Because I see that combo keep popping up, but I'm like, I don't really remember him doing a whole lot when Rule had that power, remember? And then they wanted to go away from it.
From some of the reports that I've seen, Rule was fine riding behind Teddy Bridgewater until they found their permanent solution at quarterback, and it was David Tepper who didn't want him. So like that was the reason he's out. Yeah. So a lot of those decisions, and I think it really, we talk about a lot of the quarterback carousel starts there. If they just would have rode behind Teddy Bridgewater and then like found the right guy, let him kind of like train behind him and get the reps and all that, maybe the Panthers aren't in this situation, right? And because you don't send unnecessary picks to the Jets, you don't send an unnecessary pick to the Browns, you don't send unnecessary picks to the Chicago Bears, and those picks end up being other people that you can use right now on your team to help you out in spots that you don't have.
Yeah.
So, or maybe, I don't know, because, most of the people from the 2022 draft just not on the roster right now.
Yeah, they're not even on the roster, which is nuts. So you got Ben Johnson, Jim Harbaugh, and before I get you out of here, your third and Chris Lee's top 3 head coaching candidates for the Carolina Panthers.
I think David Tepper needs to get on his Apple Music, Spotify, whatever he uses.
Oh, here we go.
Okay. And he needs to either play the Temptations version or he needs to play the TLC version. I ain't too proud to beg. Call that number. I'm sure it starts with a 704.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve. Yeah. This is Dave.
You sound like the beginning of an R&B song too.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that we did this to you last year. This should have been your team. You had us turned around. You had us going in the right direction. And I broke your heart. I broke Panther Nation's heart. Can you please come back? I'll give you whatever you want.
Oh, that would be a storybook way to get the fans back in David Tepper's good graces. That might be the only way, to be honest. Like,
it might be the only way.
I don't know if Steve would come back. Like, I don't know.
I doubt it either. I mean, there would have to be so many different assurances for him outside of, one, the check. We talked about that before.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
The check could be pretty. He wants to be back in Charlotte anyway. I would assume that's where he's going to retire at. And the check could be pretty nice. And even if that's his last NFL job, he's good for life. But then also some other assurances, like see your way out of here, Dave. You know what I'm saying? And get me a GM that I can work with and someone that's going to draft well. If you really think about the talent that's on his team that's been drafted by the Carolina Panthers, it didn't come from Scott Fitterer. It came from
Marty Herney.
Marty Hurney.
Dave Gettleman. Like, I mean, literally, yeah.
And
like,
I wouldn't even say Dave Gettleman at this point, really, because a lot of those guys are gone from the Dave Gettleman era.
Yeah, you know what? You're right.
And if you think about it, a lot of his first round guys kind of flopped besides Shaq and Christian McCaffrey, who they traded away.
DJ Moore. Well, no, Hurney was back by then, wasn't he?
It's Hurney.
Yeah. So, where's Marty Hurney's with DC? He's with Washington. But he might be out here soon, too, because Rivera probably ain't going to make it through.
Now, I'm not saying bring Hurney back. Like, I just
somebody like Hurney that got to offer
somebody who can draft well.
I wouldn't mind Hurney back, to be honest. Like,
even Hurney's first time here, he was drafting very well. He just has a bad track record of paying too much for certain people.
Yeah.
When it's not the right time. But Marty Hurney had an eye for talent. Maybe that guy needs to be the head of the scouting department. You know what I'm saying?
He's like, I was trying to think. He's like president of football operations or something for the Commanders. Him and Ron kind of came together. So,
could be that. Did you hear what Cam Newton had to say about the Carolina Panthers?
I did. I'm going to put it's in the John Johnson segment. That's going to come in.
Okay.
I'll
have to listen in on that.
Yeah. So, because I'm kind of agreeing with Cam. Like, I know what he's talking about. It's just, I don't like the fact that a lot of talking heads kind of came after him. Like, well, why are you sitting on the couch or at home or whatever? Like, that came off as almost like jealousy from that side to me. Like, he's a former league MVP. Like,
well, I'm talking about the Jordan Palmer interview with Cam.
The which one?
The Jordan Palmer interview on the QB room.
Oh, yeah. Some parts of it where he's talking about how there was no leadership and that kind of thing.
And he gave like what he would do for the Panthers, and he wants to be the Panthers, president, team president. He said,
yeah. I need to go back and watch the whole thing.
And he gave the backstory on how he had the coach, aka Matt Rule, and the backstory on the whole tie incident. Anybody who's listening, go out there, QB room, YouTube. Cam Newton, great interview, a lot of insight on certain things with the Carolina.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that tonight. Got to get you out of here. Go check out the Panthers playbook. It's on WRAL's YouTube channel. They have new episodes twice a week. Got about a month to go. I assume you guys are gonna go beyond the season like we have to do because of coaching search, draft, blah 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 blah. So we'll still be around for sure, but definitely check him out. You can find him on Twitter at Chris Lee TV. Chris Lee, what's up, man? Thanks for doing this.
Thank you, man.
Coming up. We've got David Glenn in the sports buffet. We'll touch a little bit of college sports here. The portal is out of control. We'll talk a little bit about that and some more next here on Franchise Players, WWBG 1470 AM and WTOB 980 AM.
Franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Shout out to WRL's Chris Lee for stopping by. Go check out the Panthers playbook. Him and Dennis Cox do an excellent job. And again, I commend all Panthers content creators that are out there. We are all going through it, but all of us are trying to find ways to keep it exciting and light and fun for Panther fans that have not checked out yet on this 2023 season. So shout out to Chris and Dennis who do excellent work. Go follow them on Twitter and go subscribe to their YouTube channel. In the house right now, as he comes in every other week, David Glenn from the North Carolina Sports Network and the David Glenn Show. Follow him on Twitter at David Glenn Show. What's going on, DG?
I'm doing great, Des. It's always good to be with you.
Got a couple of good things that happened and some breaking news actually when I was just on with John Johnson from WXII and he had broke that the Chargers had just fired Brandon Staley, and he's actually on my list of things in the sports buffet. So I didn't know if it was going to happen while we were doing this. So it did. So I've got a question for you for that. But first, in the sports buffet, I want to take you over to the NBA. David Glenn, if you were NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, what would you do regarding Golden State Warriors forward Draymond Green at this point? I'm sure by now you've seen the clip. He basically just hauls around and sucker punches Nurk or whatever. He said he thought he was being held or something, but if you watch the footage, it's just like, and this is like the fourth or fifth thing, like over a decade where he's done. I forgot who it was. Was it last year or year before where the dude was on the ground and he like basically stomped him in the chest and like jumped off of him or whatever and tried to play it off like he was getting tripped? What would you do if you're Adam Silver at this point?
I'd do two things. Number one, I would tell Draymond that the league comes first. What's best for the league is our starting point. And we can't have guys doing this. And as much as I admire Draymond Green in many ways, he is one of the most accomplished second-round draft picks, I believe he was.
Yeah.
In the history of the NBA.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
The overwhelming majority of the greatest players in modern NBA history were first-round draft picks, many of them lottery picks. Draymond was not an unknown, but more of a diamond of the rough. So I truly admire the guy's work ethic and his unselfishness and his two-way play. But Draymond, we can't have this, even if I do like you as the commissioner of the NBA and admire you. The second thing is we care about you. And we live in a world where people have all kinds of problems. And it's embarrassing sometimes to have your problems become public. But we have a lot of resources at the NBA. We have a lot of resources with the Golden State Warriors. And there's something there, anger management related or emotionally related or mental health related or however you want to put it. We can't possibly know all the details from the outside. But Draymond, let's try to turn a really ugly negative or series of negatives, as you described as, let's try to turn it into a positive. But you're going to have to sit until we figure out what's at the root of your overreactions on multiple occasions. So let's try to make this a win-win for the NBA where you can come back at some point, but where you just kind of digest your demons and address your demons with the help of professionals. I'm glad we're in an era where there's not as much of a taboo surrounding mental health and anger management and all that stuff.
Yeah.
As a youth coach, I had some players who I loved dearly, but had problems, no doubt, and did inappropriate things. And we just had to address it in the young people's case with their parents and their advisors. And even when you're a big boy making millions of dollars in the NBA, you just can't keep doing what Draymond's been doing.
What do you do if you're Golden State? Like, because they just extended him $100 million 4-year extension. That team is closer to the end than it is at the beginning. Klay Thompson's struggling. Really, the only Andrew Wiggins is struggling. Really, the only player that's playing well is Steph Curry. And he's 35 at this point. So if you're the Golden State Warriors, especially after this, right now the Warriors are sitting in 11th place in the West with a 10-14 record. They've lost their last 3 games. They're 4-6 in their last 10. Draymond's thing kind of, he's been suspended already once this year. So do you blow this up or do you try to just hold on and hope they catch fire? Because the West looks young. When I'm sitting there looking at the standings, the Timberwolves are at number 1, 18-5. The Nuggets are the defending champs and second. The Thunder are third. The Mavs are fourth. The Kings are fifth. It's like all the young teams are starting to elevate. And the teams like the Lakers and the Suns, the Warriors, are all kind of falling to the back part of the Western Conference. Would you blow this up if you're Golden State?
I wouldn't yet. And obviously they know more internally than we could know from the outside, just about whether they're optimistic that they can work things out with Draymond and get him eligible again and get him in a good place mentally again. Steve Kerr has kind of publicly gone to bat for Draymond to a degree. And Steve Kerr is someone that I admire greatly.
Yeah.
It is, dynasties can be fleeting, right? Every time I watch the San Antonio Spurs play, on the one hand, Victor's fun to watch. On the other hand, the Spurs are near the bottom of the standings. And you and I both remember when the Spurs were sort of the kings of the NBA universe for quite a while.
They've lost 18 straight. Yeah.
Stuff can fall apart. I wouldn't pull the trigger on sort of blowing up the foundation just yet. But you're right. They'd be wise to think in terms of that bigger picture. I just don't know enough from the outside to know if they can be optimistic about Draymond both coming back at some point and, being more of the Draymond that could help the Warriors make one more run in that very young Western Conference.
He was already starting to decline. I mean, he was becoming a liability on offense to begin with, and he's getting older too. So I don't know. We'll see. Because I've always said I've loved the Golden State Warriors. I didn't love the 2-3 years they had Kevin Durant because I feel like they tipped the scale. They kind of put their finger on the scale a little bit. But before KD and after KD, I've been a Golden State Warriors fan because I'm a Steph Curry fan. I love Steph Curry.
Me too.
I love watching him play. There's only a couple of players really where I'll watch them like during the game, like where they are, what they're doing. And Steph Curry is one he just runs around the whole game. And it's just like fun to watch and get open. Let's move over to, I had to spread a little of the Panther love to all 3 of you today because there's a whole lot to give out. And this one's more along the lines of better coaching situation. Now that the LA Chargers job is now going to be open and they're going to have just as much runway as the Panthers in terms of trying to find somebody with them doing it in the middle of the season, towards the end of the season. Which one's a better coaching situation, the LA Chargers or the Carolina Panthers. Both have billionaire owners. I know a lot of people are going to say Chargers is off the top of the bat because of Justin Herbert, but keep in mind, all their skill position players are like over the age of 30. Like they're all older guys. So like you're going to have to do kind of a rebuild there too. In Carolina, you've got your quarterback in Bryce Young, kind of got a defense there, but you've got some holes that are all over. Same with the Chargers. So I'm really curious in this answer. Which one would be the better coaching thing? Say Jim Harbaugh is trying to choose between the Chargers and the Panthers. Which one would you think he would lean more towards and why?
Yeah, I think you got to do your due diligence on the owners, right? A lot of people are skeptical about David Tepper right now. Some of the stories about how he was just very invasive and had his fingers on too many things behind the scenes. I don't hear as much of that when it comes to LA. Obviously, your starting point is right. You have to make a decision as a coaching candidate whether you believe in Bryce Young or not, because Justin Herbert is more of a proven commodity, and you would be stepping into a more stable situation, at least at the most important position on the field. Although I agree with you, the rest of that depth chart is not quite as impressive. Whereas the Panthers, if you want to look for silver linings, there are a lot of impressive pieces on defense, even if the offense is mostly kind of in disarray and almost depressing overall. So it's a close call, and you're right. Both of them have that extra runway, so to speak. David Tepper knows that he's going to have to overcome some doubters to hire his next person, because it was Ron Rivera dismissed at midseason, and it was Matt Rule dismissed at midseason, and now it's Frank Reich dismissed at midseason. So, the guy who we originally learned about because he was a minority owner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, the ultimately patient and stable NFL franchise, he hasn't shown that during his time owning the Panthers, and that rings some alarm bells for a lot of people.
I've said it. David Tepper is running this team as if it was a hedge fund. Like if you look at the moves he's made and the way he's kind of reacted to certain things, he'll jump on something early if he feels like it's worth the value. He'll get in early so he can be like, I was here before everybody else. He will jump out of a stock quick if he feels like it's on the downside. He won't wait for the end of the year. Like he's mentally wired to get out of that stock now before I lose any more money. And that's what he's done with 3 coaches. He's had 6 coaches in the past 6 years here at Carolina. But on the other hand, I will say, in terms of like the Chargers stuff, you do have Justin Herbert there in place, but you got a whole lot of stuff you got to build around that too. Chris Lee made an excellent point where he was like, the Panthers job might be valuable because there's already a track record established where it doesn't matter how long you coach here. Like your money's guaranteed. So like, say you do get fired early, it just means you're going to have 2-3 years of just guaranteed pay from David Tepper for trying. So maybe that does lure Ben Johnson or Jim Harbaugh over and be like, you know what? I can use an extra $20 million for doing nothing for 2 years because the owner was impatient and didn't realize we didn't have an offensive line. Like that could actually go down. David Glenn in the house with us here in the Sports Buffet, his bi-weekly jaunt with us here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. I want to talk about the transfer portal, and I wouldn't be able to do this justice unless I brought up the screen. So I'm going to bring up, if you guys have not seen it yet, make sure you go over to ncsportsnetwork.com. They have a transfer portal update page there. And, bless you, DG. I don't know how you're able to keep up with this because it's like, I think I just checked this morning so I can make sure that it was accurate numbers or whatever. But there are up to, I think, 1,300 kids in the portal right now. And less than 200 have actually been committed someplace. So there's like 1,100 kids that are floating around out here with no homes. And they're not all going to find homes either. And when I was looking through this morning, getting ready to do this with you, I noticed that Duke has lost a lot. Like they have lost a lot of kids, and not just like kids that are, on the bench, not getting time, like starters. Riley Leonard, official today, he's going to be at Notre Dame. We talked about that the last time you were on, that Notre Dame, this is the second year in a row they've poached a ACC Big Four quarterback to come play for them. Aeneas Peebles is gone, the defensive tackle. He was third team All ACC. Jordan Waters, he was a graduate student, third team All ACC. And then you get into the regular starters. I'm counting 4 starters, and 3-year starters gone, like leaving. They're out. RJ Oben's already committed to Notre Dame. So there's 2 kids from Duke. They're going to Notre Dame. But then you look at the other Big Four, and I don't see any starters in here from Carolina that are transferring out. But the you've seen names. So like the perception is that they're losing kids, but you got to scroll all the way down to like part-time starters, like a Elijah Green, who's a graduate student, Tayon Holloway,
and even others. We have a category called others, which is just guys who have never played at the school that they're leaving.
Yeah. So there's a lot of Florida State kids in here.
Well, the starting point, Des, is whereas in American society, we like to say that all men are created equal, right? And when it comes to transfers, they're not all created equal. So we at ncsportsnetwork.com, we actually had to create 2 different files. One is outgoing transfers, guys leaving the ACC, leaving North Carolina-based schools.
Yeah.
And that's at about 40 or 50 names. I'm sorry. Incoming is at 40 or 50 names. Outgoing is at about 150 names just in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Jeez,
so we have separated them. And one thing we're doing is whether it's an incoming guy or an outcoming guy, we're trying to differentiate between those that have been accomplished at the school they're leaving or at the school that they're departing this year to arrive in the ACC. Whatever direction they're going, we're just trying to differentiate. And your point is well taken, because whereas Carolina, UNC, has lost more than 15 transfers, there really are only 2 or 3 that would have played next year.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Most people just call that a good transfer. They call it a win-win. Why? Because the school that he's leaving gets an extra scholarship to give to somebody else who might be able to help more on the field. Mm-hmm. And the young man probably has a better chance of playing time at his new school. Now, if he's a really young guy, it's a guessing game, right? If a freshman or redshirt freshman leaves your school, you don't know if he's going to be great 2 years from now or he's going to be a backup at that other school just as he was the backup at the school he's leaving. Duke has lost the most, in my opinion, out of the 14 ACC schools. NC State would be a little bit in between. They did lose a starting defensive tackle, C.J. Clark. That's a hard position to fill sometimes, defensive tackle. They also lost a starting safety named Jakeem Harris, who was a starter prior to an injury this year. But they do like their safeties at NC State. So it's a wide variety. And, one thing we know beyond who's leaving is Notre Dame got one of Clemson's top wide receivers, a guy named Bo Collins, who left the Tigers, got the pass rushing defensive end R.J. Oben from the Blue Devils, and got their new starting quarterback Riley Leonard from Duke a year after taking Sam Hartman of Wake Forest.
It's like they're just raiding the ACC.
Notre Dame's not a full-time ACC football member, obviously, but the Irish are doing well when it comes to the incoming transfers. And actually, the Wolfpack is among those also doing well on incoming transfers, because Grayson McCall of Coastal Carolina is the only 3-time Sun Belt Player of the Year in the history of that league. 3-time Player of the Year. He was a little hurt at times this year for the Chanticleers, but he's going to be the Wolfpack's starting quarterback. And if you can find your starting quarterback in the portal, there's a whole lot of ACC teams who did that last year, and a lot of them were success stories.
Follow him on Twitter at David Glenn Show. Go and rate, subscribe the North Carolina Sports Network channel on YouTube. You can find new episodes of the David Glenn Show there. It's David Glenn. We'll see him not next week, but the week after. Well, we'll be gone too because it's Christmas. But probably last week of December, we'll be back around. Bowls and stuff will be going on, and DG will be back in. Always good to have you, man.
Always good to be with you, Des. Keep up the good work.
Coming up, WXII Sports Director John Johnson stops by, and we'll cry about the Carolina Panthers together for a little bit. It's franchise players here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com.
In professional, franchise players are often referred to as the face of the franchise.
Back in here at Franchise Player. Shout out to David Glenn and WRAL's Chris Lee for stopping by today. Right now, we've got WXII Sports Director John Johnson in the house. Follow him at Twitter on the J Johnson TV. What's going on, John? How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me back. It's good to be back with you guys.
Man, we got to talk some more about these Panthers, man. Like, we got to talk some more Panthers stuff. Now, I talked to Chris earlier in the show about his top 3 head coaching candidates, and he brought up Jim Harbaugh, Ben Johnson, and Steve Wilkes. Those were his 3.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, hey, Jim Harbaugh, I've been on him for 2 years. I wanted him before Steve Wilkes last year, and apparently he called, and maybe they can get something together with him. That would be awesome. I think that only happens if Michigan wins the national championship. So we'll kind of see with that.
Yeah.
With Ben Johnson, he's from North Carolina, played high school football at AC Reynolds up in the mountains, went to UNC Chapel Hill. So he's a North Carolina native. I just don't know if he wants to come into this, although Chris mentioned the benefit of this job is that if you get fired early, you get paid guaranteed money for like 2-3 years. That's the benefit. So
that is the benefit. Chris is right.
He's right. Because dude's paying like 3 coaches right now that are not attached to the team. So, and then the last one, Steve Wilkes. I would love for that would be the perfect storybook kind of closure to this era of the Panthers. I just don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think Steve would come back to work for Tepper at this point. I don't know. What are your thoughts on Chris's top 3?
I love Chris's top 3. I don't think either 3 are going to be the Panthers head coach. I think Wilkes, I think that bridge was burned last year when Tepper decided to, go in a different direction with Frank Reich. So I think we can automatically cross that out. I think the interesting thing with Brandon Staley, who was just fired by the Chargers, that Chargers job moves to the top of the list.
I did not. I've been doing recordings for the show. I did not know that.
It just happened. So there you go. A little breaking news.
Yeah.
So the Chargers, fired Brandon Staley. I feel like they're going to really go hard after Jim Harbaugh, and former Charger quarterback. If he says no, then Johnson in Detroit, I think, wants that job to be the Chargers head coach, which you know what I mean? And it's like if Harbaugh gets the job with the Chargers, then Johnson's got his pick of the litter. He could go to potentially Washington because that job's going to eventually open up, Carolina because he's a North Carolina guy, or he just stays in Detroit and waits to see what else is in the cycle that, comes available. So I like all 3. I think they'd be nice hires. I do wonder what that dynamic would be like with Harbaugh and Tepper.
That'd be fun for us.
I think we've had enough drama to deal with.
They got to just like GM or something, right? Like, because that's why he didn't stay in San Francisco. He wasn't allowed to really have full control over personnel, and he did call in. Like, we didn't pursue him. He was interested in us last year around about this time, and basically Tepper was just like, nah. He wanted offensive-minded head coach, which I don't understand. Like, I don't understand why the head coach has to be offensive-minded or defensive-minded. Now, if he's defensive-minded, like every other coach in Panthers history, you're probably going to help your defense out more in terms of the game you call on offense. You just need a good play caller. You don't need a head coach that's an offensive-minded guy. You just need a guy at that spot that can call plays and understands 2023 NFL football. We thought that was Thomas Brown, but after after Sunday, it just felt, I don't know, man. I don't know what they're calling. Like, it's weird. Why are you at midfield? It's 4th and 1. You've got a 5 wide receiver set, empty backfield. Bryce is in shotgun. Like, so you got to get 5 yards to get 1 pretty much. And they throw it 30 yards deep down the field. Like, they did twice. Yeah. And it was just like, is he doing this on purpose? Like, it felt like he was doing it on purpose.
I'm a little confused. And we were talking about this, off air before I stepped on. I've been at every home game this year except for one. We've been on the road for, a game as well. Conceptually, I'm not sure what the Panthers are trying to do. And I think part of the issue was Frank Reich was trying to blend some of his concepts with Thomas Brown's concepts that he had learned under Sean McVay. But they're 2 different schematic schemes.
Yeah.
McVay likes to run the stretch outside zone, run game concept where, Reich likes a little bit more of a power football and the position pieces didn't really necessarily, and they don't necessarily fit. So you're blending 2 offensive concepts that just don't work. And Brown's never called plays before. That also needs to be kind of attested to as well. Sean McVay called plays in LA. So this is the first time that he's ever had to do this at an NFL level. So it's a steep learning curve for him because it's not even his offense.
Right. Yeah. He's calling
somebody
else's playbook.
Yeah. He's calling Frank's plays with Sean McVay's plays. And you do it, you make the change in the middle of the season. You can't really change the offense because there's just no time. So what we're seeing here is, personally, what I'm seeing is, concepts that don't make sense, concepts that don't mesh together, and a quarterback that's being put in position where he's still learning how to play an NFL game. I'll bring up something real quick. I was listening to Watson Brown, the brother of Mac Brown, North Carolina's head coach. And he was talking about the concepts of how things are different in college than they are in the NFL. And it's all true where in the NFL, we have tighter splits. The yard markers and the hash lines are tighter. And within those tighter splits, everything is much more condensed with, your receivers, your running backs. And that's why you like to see your quarterbacks play a little bit more under center, because you can add that play action aspect of things to kind of bring the safeties into the box to create some more openings. And the Panthers just don't necessarily do that enough because Bryce is still learning how to play under center. You know what that was part of what we're seeing. And I'm just taking pieces of what Watson Brown was talking about on the radio on another show earlier this week, where he was breaking down the difference between college and the NFL. And it's true. And that's part of the issues we're seeing here with the Panthers.
Follow him on Twitter /X at the J Johnson TV. John Johnson, sports director for WXII TV, joining us here on Franchise Players. I agree. Like, I was sitting there, when me and Chris were talking earlier in the show, we were trying to figure out where has Bryce progressed this year. And I was like, granted, we know the offensive line's trash. He doesn't really have skill position players that can help him out. All those things are true, but have we seen anything that he's done that's made us think, well, okay, that's why we drafted him number one? And Chris was like, I can't really blame Bryce for everything that's around him. It's just really hard to evaluate him. I'm looking at it more like, even most teams that pick at number one typically won't have anything around that quarterback when they draft, and that's why they're picking number one. They're not a good team, but we've been able to see flashes from those number one picks: Cam Newton, Joe Burrow. You go down the line just the past 15 years, where even in their rookie seasons, they had games where they flashed. Now, granted, Cam came into a situation in 2011 where he had, a future Hall of Famer and Steve Smith on the outside. He had Greg Olsen at tight end. Jordan Gross was his left tackle. Like Thomas Davis was on the defense. Like, they had Jonathan Stewart and D'Angelo Williams were still there. Like, they just need to parachute a quarterback in, like Scott Fitterer said about a year ago. Scott Fitterer traded off all the pieces before Bryce got here. Yeah. So there's nothing around him really. Is this the lowest point in Panthers franchise history? Because there's a couple of points we could look at on the Marvel timeline for the Panthers. Or have we got there? Is that where we are right now?
That's a great question. And I'm hesitant to say it is, because I really think there are pieces here that could really change this franchise rather quickly. We know the defense is good. And I think that was what part of Scott Fitterer was talking about, last year, where they needed they were a quarterback, quote unquote, a quarterback away. And if you go back to when we talked about it pre-draft, I said I wouldn't have traded the farm for a quarterback to at this point, because I just didn't believe that that's what the Panthers needed to do. Yeah. I thought they were more than just a quarterback away on the offensive side. And it's proven that way. I don't find this to be the lowest point, because I do believe they have the quarterback. We saw more, and Chris Lee will tell you this too, because he and I were both at training camp together. We saw more in Bryce at training camp than we have during the regular season. And I think a lot of that is because of, camp, you see practices, but he wasn't getting hit that much.
Yeah.
You get through 4, 5, 6 weeks of the NFL season where he's constantly getting hit. There's nowhere for him to step up in the pocket. There's nowhere for him to go. The receivers are not creating separation. There's no route concepts at all. The offensive system is not giving Bryce anything to work with. He's now become gun shy. The one thing I'm afraid of is that we see Bryce regress to the point where he falls into that David Carr, Zach Wilson. And I'll go to my grave and say that David Carr would have been a great quarterback in the NFL had he not been absolutely destroyed for the first couple of years of his career.
Sam Darnold to a certain extent.
Sam Darnold, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
These guys where they were put in positions where they should have been protected more, surrounded by better pieces, to at least let them elevate their first year. Because you can even go back to Manning in his first year with the Colts. They at least had a running back they could rely on.
Marshall Faulk, yep.
Yeah, like the Panthers have a good running back, but they have 3 of the same guys.
And they didn't really even use them until last week.
And and that's the thing. So I'm hesitant to say this is the darkest time in Panthers history.
Would you bench Bryce Young for Andy Dalton at this point? Because that conversation started popping up 2-3 weeks ago. Actually, I mentioned it because I was like, if it was right after Wright got fired. Actually, I was like, you should bench him now, because what's the reason to keep him in? Like, he's not going to be in this offense next year. He's going to learn a brand new offense. So why are you throwing him back out there? You just changed play callers on him for the 3rd time this year. The offensive line has gotten worse since Frank Wright got fired, because they can't keep the same 5 in there. what do you do if you leave him out there in week 15, he gets hurt and he misses all next year? You know, like, then what do you do? Like, that's rock bottom. So, like, why don't we put the Ferrari in the garage, let him stand on the sideline and watch this game with Andy Dalton and learn from there? It's his job next year. Like, there's no question of whether or not it's his team. I'm just more concerned about what's in front of him. I'm just like, I don't know if this is beneficial for his game to stay in here these last 4 games. You're out of playoff contention. Like, it just doesn't feel like he needs to be out there. Do you feel that way? Because there's others who are like, no, he needs to stay out there. Would you bench Bryce for Andy Dalton at this point?
Interestingly enough, I was on record saying I wouldn't have started Bryce to begin the season anyway.
I like that idea. Yeah.
I just didn't think it was. I thought he just needed some time. There's an old, and I'm a big hockey guy. They take a lot of these young players that just get into the league, and sometimes you just kick them up to the bench and you kick them up into the skybox and you have them watch the game for a game or two, because then they get to see what it looks like out there, what they're missing. Sometimes, the eye in the sky doesn't lie, and there's a benefit to it. At this point in the season, while I think there is a benefit of kicking him up into the press box just so he can watch, taking the hockey analogy, would be a perception that you messed up by benching him, that you messed up with the selection, that you don't trust him. And that's the hardest part. And that's the game the Panthers are playing with right now. It's why I thought at the beginning of the season, if you started Andy Dalton, and let's be real, Andy probably wins you week 1 in Atlanta.
Yeah.
We saw how well he played in the Seattle game, where you were in it, the Panthers were in it to the very end. There's a chance they win maybe 3-4 games, in the first 7-8 weeks of the season.
I'll go further than that, because it seems like a lot of our games were 1 possession type losses.
And that's my point.
We probably would be contending for the NFC South.
Especially as bad as that division is, you know what I mean? And at that point, it doesn't matter if you have Bryce Wally Pip him, because we knew he was going to start anyway. Who cares?
Right. Yeah.
Andy just gave him some time to see what he was looking at, and then Bryce comes into play. But we can't go back in time at this point. So, at this point, I'd probably let him play.
I feel like that's a David Tepper decision too, that Bryce started instead of Andy Dalton, because to me that sounds like something Frank Wright would have did. Like, he would have started Andy to start off and then turned it over to Bryce week 3, week 4, whatever. Maybe around the same time they changed the play calling, because it was the same thing. That narrative was out there. They were thinking about doing it around the bye week. He does it. Sounds like he had a conversation with Tepper where Tepper's like, hey, you better do something. And he's like, let me take this joystick back real quick. If we're going to go down, I'm going to go down as the one driving the car. So
I got no information on it, but that's been my running theory, is that Frank probably would have slow played Bryce into the starting lineup,
which would have made a lot more sense. But it feels like David and Nicole Tepper wanted Bryce Young for the past 2 years, and they finally got their toy on the team. They thought that, here we go, we're about to go because we got our guy. Let's let him go. And they didn't anticipate all this other stuff. I was going to ask you about Cam Newton's comments from earlier, his game changer comments from online. If you haven't seen it online yet, it's out there. It's all over the place. Kimberly Martin and a couple of others got into it back and forth with him regarding it. I think they didn't understand what he was saying, and he came back on today and clarified what he said. And that's what I thought he was saying to begin with, that honestly, John, there's only like 3 or 4 game changer quarterbacks in the NFL. Like, what he was, game manager is not a diss. Tom Brady was a game manager. He's the greatest quarterback of all time.
That was Cam's point.
Yeah. Like, it's just like, what are y'all doing? Why are y'all? It's because it's Cam Newton saying it, and he's sitting at home right now and hasn't played in 2 years. That was Kimberly Martin's take on it. It's like, well, you're not even playing right now. How can you judge these quarterbacks? The dude's a former league MVP. He's got records that quarterbacks will never break in this league ever. Like, he's one of one. He's one of them dudes. He was a game changer. Like,
I was just about to say that.
He's coming from previous experience. He drugged that 2015 team. That team had no business being 15-1 with the number 1 offense and defense in the Super Bowl. Like, literally, people don't understand how close to immortality that dude was. If they had won that Super Bowl, they would have been a top 3 all-time NFL team. Like, if you look at everything, they would have been 16-1 or 17-1 or whatever it was, 18-1. They would have had the league MVP, the coach of the year, I think the defensive player of the year, the number 1 defense, the number 1 offense, the number 1 scoring offense. They would have been up there with the 85 Bears and the 84 49ers. Like, there would be no argument about it. And because they didn't win that game, you don't think of that team in that manner. You think of them like the 98 Vikings or something like that. But he was a part of that. So when he's talking about game changers versus game managers, I completely agree with everything he's saying. I think it's just more who it came from that rubs people the wrong way.
Cam makes people crazy. It's like, that's like the running thing, or you need to put it on a t-shirt. Cam makes people crazy.
Cam
yeah,
makes
like
people crazy.
He hit it on the head. There really are like 3 players, 4 quarterbacks in the NFL that are game changers, game breaker type players. And you mentioned it. He was one of them. In his prime, he could literally change a game. And there's nothing. We literally would watch him do that. And there's nothing wrong with being a game manager. Like, and that's his point. Like, you're not the best player on the team. And like the Dolphins is the best example that he gave. Tua is not the best player on that Dolphins offense.
Right.
It's Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's not a diss to Tua.
No, and it's like he knows how to manage the game in the sense that he knows how to manage giving Hill the ball in space to let him change the outcome of the game. Like,
you can be a game manager and league MVP. Like, it happens all the time.
All the time.
Because I think it was when he threw Dak Prescott's name in there after the year he's having. That's when all of them were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you put Dak in it." Dak Prescott is a game manager quarterback. Like, he is not like a dude that's going to go run for 150 yards on the ground and throw for 250 and be by far the best player on the field. Like, that's not him. But he can make sure he doesn't turn the ball over. And he can make sure he's going to get you 3 touchdowns, 300 yards. He's going to spread it out. Like, that's a game manager. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be a game manager. So
he wasn't calling him Jerry Garoppolo. That's
right. Yeah, exactly.
That's what he was saying.
Oh man, follow him on Twitter at the J Johnson TV. WXII Sports Director John Johnson in the house. Appreciate you stopping by, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. Of course.
And that's going to do it for Franchise Players for Friday, December the 15th, 2023. Lots of stuff on Tobacco Road this weekend. We've got North Carolina A&T men's hoops action late. They're in Las Vegas Saturday night and Sunday night. I think 8:30 pregame shows there. The North Carolina Coaches Association East-West Football All-Star Game is on Saturday afternoon. Myself and Mike Fanning will be on the call for that, live from Grimsley High School. You can listen to that on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com at 12:30 p.m. on Saturday, or stream it on the Grimsley NFHS feed. For David Glenn, for Chris Lee, for John Johnson, I'm Desmond Johnson. You've been listening and watching the Franchise Players here on TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com.